What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me here on episode 97 of the 90 Feet from Home Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Orrico, and we are going to be continuing with our position previews today. I apologize for missing last week. Was dealing with a bit of a flu, but we've rescheduled with a fantastic guest. He was the first guest I ever had on any podcast long ago. I want to say 4 years now, but it might be 3, it might be 5. I can't even keep track anymore. We've known each other a long time. He's a great dude, great friend of mine. Mr. Ryan Bloomfield, who you can find over on Twitter at RyanBHQ. He is a writer at BaseballHQ and a 2-time FSWA winner, including Baseball Writer of the Year. Ryan, my friend, thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing, man?
Always a pleasure, Rico. Not just doing the show, but getting to catch up with you beforehand. I know times are crazy right now in the baseball world. Like this is our peak. This is our time. So it's cool to carve out a little bit of time, chat with you a little bit, and talk some first base. So yeah, I'm doing well, man.
You are one of my favorite guests. I'm biased because you were the first person who said yes to me way back in the day. But long journey from then. We've played golf together. We've hung out over many meals and got to see each other in person over the last several years. So always great when we get to catch up. Another time coming this year in November in First Pitch, Arizona. I'll start talking about First Pitch throughout the season, and it's something that you guys will just have to deal with because it's my favorite weekend of the year. Ryan and the guys at HQ do a fantastic job, and a little bit too early for actually booking stuff right now, but keeping an eye on the Baseball HQ website for those early bird specials and when the hotels are up. If you haven't been to Arizona for First Pitch, Ryan can tell you. Anybody who's been there can tell you it's the best weekend of the year.
Absolutely. Everyone will hear more about it as I think we usually open up signups in like June or July or whatnot, but we do have dates. It is November 6th through 9th, 2025, out in Phoenix. So, start putting that in those negotiations with your significant other. If you want to take that weekend out to the desert, it is the 6th through the 9th. That part we have nailed down. So more to come this summer, but yeah, we will definitely do the Bubba and the Bloom Golf Invitational as well, for sure. And then all the usual normal shenanigans that come out of First Pitch Arizona.
Baseball, beer, drafts.
It's
a hell of a weekend. It's more than a weekend. It's like a 4-day trip, and I might even go on Wednesday and just kind of stretch it out a little bit longer. I like to, there's been a couple of years where I've like red-eye flights, Thursday night in, Sunday morning out. Like, nah, just enjoy the weekend.
My favorite was this might have been 2 years ago. You flew in from, it's a long flight from Canada. You landed like right when we were starting our golf outing. And I remember looking over, I was like warming up for the round or whatever, hitting some balls. I look over and I see you hauling your luggage over to the practice green. I'm like, oh man. And I think it was like a very early flight, like a long day. I respected your commitment to the bit with that. That was
I was going through demons. I was going through demons in the airport because it was like early morning, and I'm thinking because the flight got delayed. I was at the airport for like 5 a.m. and flight gets delayed, and I'm like, I'm supposed to have a tea time this afternoon. I've already had to wake up at like 3:30 today. Flight's delayed. I was in a stall when I landed at the Phoenix airport at Sky Harbor, changing from my sweatpants into my golf shirt in the tiny stall, and then it was a great time. There's tons of great memories every year. It's definitely worth checking out. That one definitely stands out. And I don't think I broke 100 or maybe even 200 that day, but it's still a great time. It's still always a great time when we get to go out to Arizona. Before I get going here, just want to remind you guys about one of the sponsors of the show. That's BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is the ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here, and what also starts here is our first base preview. Apologies for the preamble. It's unavoidable when you get a couple guys like Ryan and myself together, but we are going to be talking about first base. We're going to be breaking it down in chunks of 5, and we are going to be looking at the last 2 weeks of RotoWire Online Championship ADP on the NFBC. These are 12-team drafts, 12-team fab leagues. If you're not familiar with fab, it's essentially just like a bidding system instead of a waiver wire for those who are uninitiated. But this is a pretty standard 12-team format on the NFBC, and we are going to be talking about first base and breaking it down from the top here, starting with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bryce Harper, Freddie Freeman, Matt Olson, and Pete Alonso. they do make a good chunk to talk about because they are the 5 guys that will go in those first 3 to 4 rounds, and after there is a bit of a tier drop off. So, Ryan, within this group, do you find that you like to shop here? Do you find that you like to maybe target 1 or 2 of these guys? Are there a bunch of fades? What's your thought process on this top tier of first baseman?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good breakoff point because after Alonso, there's not another pick until Christian Walker, like 96 from an ADP of 45. So there is a big drop off after this 5. I kind of view this as like 2 different subgroups. I think there's a clear top 3 at first base. I think it's Vlad, Harper, Freeman. Bubba and I on our Bubba and the Bloom podcast have debated that order many times. I don't think there's a right or wrong order. I have them Vlad, Freeman, Harper, but I certainly understand different variations with that. And yes, I am very happy to grab one of those top 3 first basemen in either in a 15-teamer at the wheel, 15, 16, whatever, or in a 12-teamer kind of later in that second round. I actually took Freddie Freeman last evening in the labor mixed 15-team draft in the second round and was happy for it. So I do like those top 3 quite a bit. Olsen, Alonso, maybe we'll talk about them in a little bit, but not as much. I think, and this kind of gets thrown out a lot in different podcasts that you listen to, but like that old adage of like, oh, you can get similar stats later in the draft. I think Olsen and Alonso are kind of that just like generic, okay batting average, good power, no speed, where there's just more attractive, unique profiles early in the draft that I'm going after, like my first closer, a good starting pitcher, someone with speed. I'm going after those guys as opposed to an Olsen or Alonso, and I'm taking I don't know, Christian Walker, Jake Berger type much later on.
Yeah, I agree. Like Alonso, when he was unsigned and he was falling, then he was a little bit interesting because there'd be times when you get into the 60s and 70s, but he's back up to full price at this point. And while I think he's still going to be a 30-plus home run guy pretty easily, I think I agree that I just don't like to really shop in that tier there in the 3rd or 4th round. I have Vladdy once or twice this year. I have a couple of Freddie Freeman shares, and I think I have 1 Bryce Harper share. Those are definitely the elite of the elite. And with first base, it does dry up pretty considerably. Like it's not at this point in the draft, but if you do lock down one of these names and you just don't have to worry about it at all, I think that's definitely something I'd like to do. I have Freeman over Harper. I just think the lineup is safer. I think you're probably still getting more speed. I think Vladdy's the clear one, though. You and Bubba don't have any debate on that, do you?
We both have Vladdy first. I don't think it's like leaps and bounds, honestly.
Yeah.
And if I'm trying to get steals, like I think Harper Freeman gets you 10.
Yeah.
Whereas Vlad maybe a handful. And I think that matters. But yeah, Vlad is number 1. I don't think it's crazy like to take a Freeman or Harper over him though, honestly.
Yeah, no, I probably wouldn't do it myself. I mean, I've had a lot more Vladdy bias a couple of weeks ago up until he started liking all these New York Yankees posts and all this different stuff, causing all these. He said he doesn't want to be a distraction, and now he's a huge distraction. You got to love it. This is last year.
You do have to, and I'm totally going to derail this and get you going with some Jay slander. Like, good Lord, did they botch this entire offseason negotiation with Vladimir Guerrero? Just terrible. Awful.
They're a joke. And the fact that the same administration is still here making moves and they're going to be the ones who potentially trade him, I think that they should have cleaned house probably before last year. But I mean, the way that the team has gone, it's been awful, to the point Vladdy said a couple of years ago he'd rather be dead than play for the Yankees. And now he's liking pictures where there's Yankee jersey swaps and he's saying I'm open to everybody, and it's just it's a dark time in Toronto. Like 4 years ago, it was Semien, it was Teoscar, it was Vladdy with an MVP type season, Bichette breaking out. It was this juggernaut team that was a 90-plus win. It looked like they were set up for 90 wins every year going forward, and now they're going to be a lottery team probably this year, as they should be. They're a joke. They're a joke, and they've gotten better. But I mean, I don't like the Blue Jays at this point. I took off the Blue Jays hat. I usually been wearing it, not wearing it today. I do think that Vladdy's probably in for a big season, as much as he's pissing me off. Heading into the free agency with all this ammunition about the team doesn't want to pay you, I feel like he's going to hit probably 35 home runs, hit 310, and drive in 100. I think that for me, he's probably still that clear first baseman. But if somebody did want to wait and take Freeman or Harper, I don't have any problem there.
Yeah. Achievement unlocked, by the way. That was my goal coming on the show today, was just to get a little Blue Jays in there. So glad I did that.
The Blue Jays, oh man, I won't go down it anymore. I could derail this show in a serious
It's
way.
your show. You can do whatever, but
This is true. This is true. We can swear. We can do whatever we like on this podcast, and there could be some swearing if we we keep going down the Toronto road. Um, I want to mention Matt Olson real quick. I feel like we should get more of a discount on him after what we saw last year. It still feels like he's pretty full priced.
agreed. There is not much of her for as bad as Matt Olson was last year. You're still paying that top 40, almost top 35 price. Agreed. And kind of what exactly what I was saying earlier is just like, it's just for me, it's a vanilla profile. Yes, this is someone who was a top 5 overall hitter in 2023. Get my years right. So there is that type of ceiling with Matt Olson, the lineup's great, all that stuff. It's just the type of player in 5x5 leagues getting a 250-ish batting average guy with no steals. Yeah. Like for me, that's just a tough pull early in the draft.
Yeah, I can't disagree there. The team should be better. Everybody kind of disappointed in Atlanta last year, so there's hope for the bounce back. But as the fourth first baseman, I just can't do it. Especially, we're going to talk about a guy in this next tier that kind of is very similar profile-wise to Olson and Alonso. But let's move on to that second tier here, starting with Salvi Perez, Christian Walker, Cody Bellinger, Josh Naylor, and Jake Berger. Now, Sal Perez, first base eligible, but you're not going to put him at first base. There's just no reason to. He's going to be in your catcher spot, so you can essentially ignore him. The guy that I have a lot of interest in is Christian Walker, and it was Ben Tidd, actually. Yeah. I forget if it was part of something on your Patreon or if he just wrote it up somewhere. But Christian Walker's batted ball data is very, very similar to Pete Alonso and Matt Olson. He's going quite a bit later. He is in a new situation in Houston in a great lineup with that short porch in left field. Is Christian Walker essentially just the discounted version of Alonso and Olson to you, Ryan?
Yeah, that's exactly what he is. And that's why and again, going 50 picks later. So give me, and like I would take Alonso or Olson over Christian Walker straight up. Like I do think those guys are better, but give me Christian Walker with my top reliever, for example, that I can get instead of Matt Olson or Pete Alonso in that spot, because like the middle relief pool, as we all know, fantasy baseball is kind of a big puzzle. You got to put that all together. You just have so much more flexibility what you can do where those other guys are getting drafted. And yeah, it's a very much similar profile, if not almost equal, with the park change that you mentioned, Joe, with Christian Walker. So I am a big fan of Christian Walker this season.
Not the youngest guy in the world, but those barrel rates, hard hit rates are still good. The Crawford boxes are definitely really appealing. Yep. The rest of this group with Bellinger, Naylor, and Berger, I think that Berger is a pretty interesting target. The other two I haven't landed on quite as much. Bellinger, I guess it's just maybe he wasn't great last year. He's been pretty inconsistent over the last several years. He's mixed in some great seasons like he did in 23, but I don't know exactly what version of him I'm getting. Naylor going to a new situation is probably fine. I mean, it was the best offense in baseball last year by runs scored in Arizona. And I think he's a fairly similar version offensively to what you're going to get out of Christian Walker. Not exactly the same, but the offense should still be very good. I haven't been big on Naylor really at the price. I'd rather just wait around and take Jake Berger, and I also get multi-position eligibility there. What do you think?
I'm good with that. Naylor does give you, well, we think he'll give you some speed, which is a little bit of a help, but yeah, no, I'm good with that with Jake Berger. With Naylor. I am ending up with Berger. The issue, or not the issue, the thing with Jake Berger, at least on teams that I'm drafting him on, is usually I'm sticking him over at third base, because third base is kind of rough. So yes, Jake Berger's first base eligible. Love the lineup. Texas should be similar along the lines of what we were just talking about with Atlanta. I think a lineup that underperformed last year that will rebound this year. So I like that for Jake Berger, but usually I'm throwing him over at third base. I am like maybe irrationally high on Cody Bellinger this year, and I don't really know why. I do think there is, so the first base outfield eligibility helps, especially in leagues that I have been drafting in, which is draft and hold. That kind of changes a little bit now, switching over into fab leagues. But Sarah Sanchez, who's our friend, First Pitch Arizona attendee, big Cubs fan, she had noted, I did not know this, that last year Wrigley was like the worst park for left-handed hitters.
Really?
Really took down, for whatever reason, in terms of park factors, just like a bad wind, bad weather, just like a random rough stretch of that. Chicago was very tough for left-handed hitters last year, and obviously Bellinger now moves to Yankee Stadium, and it's just the Bellinger. It's an upper 40% fly ball rate. I mean, this is a swing that very much gets affected by where he plays, and for those reasons, I am in on Cody Bellinger more than I probably should be, but I do like him, even though the raw, you can look at barrel rate, it's not that great, but like he pulls balls in the air, and at Yankee Stadium, that's going to work. In Wrigley, it did not.
Just from the pure lineup standpoint, this might sound kind of crazy, but do you think the Yankees lineup is definitively better than what the Cubs are going to trot out this season?
Definitively, no. And the Cubs lineup, I would say, is much deeper. Yankees lineup is not deep at all. So no, I don't think from an actual like supporting run support team context. No, I don't think there's a huge difference between the two.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say Yankees without looking at it, but the Cubs actually have a pretty deep lineup, even without Bellinger. Just as kind of a side note, maybe I've drafted him once or twice, maybe, but I'm gonna have to dig in a little bit more there. Looking at the fly balls in Yankee Stadium with that, what is it, 312 feet, 314 feet to right field. So that could be something that really pays off with Cody Bellinger. The next tier is Vinny Pasquantino, Tristan Casas, Spencer Steer, Paul Goldschmidt, and Luis Arraez. Not generally a tier that I'd like to be shopping in, although I will say this is probably about the end of the actual legit like first base as opposed to corner infield options. Probably around Casas or Steer, roughly. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah, depending on what you think of Tristan Casas and Spencer Steer, I'll get to that. But yes, we talk about cliffs and everything at positions and whatnot. It's important to know where that talent drops off. And yeah, at first base, this is pretty much exactly where it happens. In a lot of drafts, I am certainly trying to prioritize getting at least one first baseman by this point because yeah, it gets rough pretty quick.
Within this tier, anybody specifically that you are targeting or fading?
Fading. Tristan Casas is like my biggest fade.
Really? Okay.
2025. I don't know if you're a big Casas guy or not. I think his price is being buoyed by one really good half season. And maybe that version of Tristan Casas sticks around for a full year. I am worried as hell about the ribcage injury last year. That comment about like when he swings, it's a car crash in his body. Like how, like, and maybe that's been overblown or whatever, but like, how is that going to, that's not going to change from last season to this season. So I don't think I can trust Tristan Casas to last a full season. And that's my biggest thing with him in terms of why he's a fade. The other thing with Casas, like, even if it clicks, like I still like, he's going to get what like we want Christian Walker to be, I feel like. And again, I am down on Tristan Casas. So feel free to tell me I'm crazy, but like, even if it clicks, you're still getting I think low batting average, high power guy with no steals. It's like, yeah, it's later in the draft that works, but I feel like that's the ceiling for Casas. So I know a lot of smart people disagree with me on that, but Casas is my biggest fade at the position.
Oh, it's interesting. Like I hadn't really thought about it. So I'd forgotten about that quote, the car crash quote, which definitely doesn't give you that warm and fuzzy feeling. I don't know what I think about whether or not he's even going to be a Red Sox or not, because there's been so much talk about potentially trading him. And I wonder, like, this is a point in your favor. Like he's already in one of the most favorable ballparks, not necessarily for lefties, but just overall. Wherever he gets traded, should it happen, is likely a park downgrade on top of that. So, and it looks like the writing on the wall is that he's probably not going to be in Boston, but I guess we never really know. But it seems like they're kind of angling towards trading him for a pitcher, like if it's a George Kirby earlier or Dylan Cease or whoever. Do you think that actually ends up happening? And do you think he starts the year with the Red Sox? I guess we're kind of approaching the point where he probably does. But
yeah, I think it's more like if you would ask me that a month ago, I'd be like, hell no, it's not going to be on the Red Sox. And I mean, the Red Sox have since signed Bregman, and now there's a fiasco at third base, which will leak in over to first base. But that's another reason why, like, I didn't mention that initially with Casas, but it's like the Red Sox team seem dead set on trading their 25-year-old first baseman. So it's like, why would I have a ton of faith in Tristan Casas if his own team doesn't even share that same faith. So like, I don't know, it's just another point to bolster my my Casas fade argument, I guess.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with it. Like the barrel rates are really good, the lineup should be pretty good, but I also don't necessarily love the profile outside of that. Like you said, you're getting probably 0 steals, not a great batting average.
I mean, he's
I
never
think that
hit like he's never. So I mean, just looking in Costas's baseball forecaster player box, we go back the last 5 years, and Tristan Casas. I mean, he's only been playing for the last 4. He's never had a season above 502 plate appearances, majors and minors combined. It's like I don't know. You're spending a decently early pick on somebody who hasn't done it before, and I don't really like doing that.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Pasquantino and Steer make up the sandwich around him. I think I kind of like Vinny P. I like the way that the Royals lineup has been trending. He doesn't strike out a lot. I think a fully healthy season, especially if they're going to be kind of, keeping his time in the field in check a little bit. He's dealt with some injuries. Maybe he's DHing, mixing off with Salvi Perez, so he's not as exposed in the field. I kind of like Pasquantino this season.
Yeah. And I certainly in certain formats like points leagues where the walk rate was down for Vinny P a little bit last season, but traditionally a very patient hitter and also like does not strike out. So I know there are a lot of points league players out there in leagues that will ding you for strikeouts. Like Vinny P moves up quite a bit in those types of formats. So yeah, I mean I would take Vinny P over Tristan Casas 99% of the time in drafts right now.
I completely agree on the Vinny P over Casas take. Spencer Steer is somebody you can see on the screen here that we did the surf draft over the last weekend. And Spencer Steer, his ADP is 144. It's a different format. It's a 15-teamer versus a 12-teamer. But he went at pick 176. And I said to myself, if he was still there when Mike came on the clock next time, then that's the right time to jump in. Because there is a lot of time when he's going close to pick 100, 110. The ADP is at 144 with the minimum at 116. I do worry about the batting average. He was awful in the second half, but if he starts to fall more and more, and it seems like throughout the course of draft season, Steer's price has gone downward, I feel like he's starting to get to a point where I don't mind jumping in, especially with the dual eligibility. What do you think?
Yeah, the dual eligibility, and I think you've got a good. I'm with you on the batting average floor. Yeah, it was like a 207 batting average in the second half last year. But you look at the last 2 seasons of homers and steals, 23 and 15 homers and steals in 2023, and then last season it was 2025. Like that is really good power speed production. Just one thing I'll add with Spencer Steer is just keep an ear out, keep an eye out. He's got a shoulder injury right now in camp, so a little bit early to be ringing the alarm. We are still a month away from opening day, but just kind of keep that on your peripheral if the shoulder lingers. But no, great park to hit in. Spencer Steer's an everyday player for the Reds, and he's fine. Not somebody I'm like searching out, but kind of like what you just said. If Spencer Steer fell a little bit more in your surf draft, he'd be someone I'm just I'm good with. Not specifically a major target, but certainly not a fade.
Yeah, once he starts getting around 13, 14 and a 15-teamer, then I think that's totally reasonable.
Yep.
In this tier as well, Goldschmidt, I don't know that I love Goldschmidt at this stage of his career. The park maybe will help, but he's not great anymore. He's like 37. The metrics have been trending in the wrong direction. I don't think I've drafted him even once this year. Have you?
I have not taken Old Schmidt, and that's what we call him on Bubba and the Bloom. There was like a little bit of a second half rebound with Goldschmidt, and then obviously I guess he liked the move to the Yankees, I guess, but it's not. Yankee Stadium for right-handed hitters is it's fine, and I just think there's a real risk like that Goldschmidt. He's an old, so like there's real risk that this decline just keeps going, and that's tough.
And the last guy in that tier is Luis Ariz, and I can't do it.
Not in roto leagues for me.
The way that I've talked about it, and I actually mentioned it with Justin on Sleeper on the Bus last week, is if I want to take a guy like Luis Ariz, I'm going to wait like 200 picks and take Jacob Wilson because it's like the same profile. It's a different position, so it might have to massage things a little bit there. But if I want a guy who can hit 300 and give me like 5 steals and 5 homers throughout the year, that's what Jacob Wilson is probably going to be doing, and I don't have to pay a top 200 price for it. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, Luis Arias to me is like the whack-a-mole guy, where it's like, oh crap, I need, at least in Roto leagues, like, oh crap, I need batting average. Let me take Luis Arias.
Yeah.
Oh, oh crap, he's only projected for like 10 home runs by most projection systems. Now I need power. So then I take a power guy that doesn't get batting average. Like, and it's just like, I don't know. If you look at like a valuation system, Luis Arias always comes out pretty good because the batting average is so elite, and you can certainly build teams that work around Luis Arias. If you get like a Kyle Schwarber or something like that, start with like an Ellie De La Cruz, and you have a ton of counting stats, and you need to shore up that batting average with Arias. But I just think, like, I don't know, you're just kind of like shifting your problems elsewhere, which in fantasy baseball and in life, you don't really want to do. So don't be Luis Arias in real life.
I have paired him with Schwarber. Was it this
Makes
year?
sense.
Last year?
That's like one of the few. I could see
My,
that.
ar-
I could see that.
my argument would be that by taking both of them, and it does make sense, but then you're kind of eliminating the good thing that the other guy does. You know, but if you're balancing up between the two of them, then that's going to average out to like 20 something homers with like a 260 batting average, maybe. Like, it's still, I think it can still work, but you're taking Schwarber for that elite power. And then if you take an Xavier Edwards or you take a Luis Arias, and you're kind of negating that bonus you have by taking them a little bit.
And then the other thing you're doing is, like, from a risk standpoint, if one of those two guys goes down, either way, your categories are all out of whack. Whereas, like, if you take two more balanced players and one of them gets hurt, it's like, well, okay, I take a hit kind of across the board, but it's nothing crazy. If you are solely depending on Luis Arias to buoy your team's batting average and he gets hurt, or just has like a run of, unfortunate BABIP or whatever, and doesn't hit 300, only hits 280 or something. That kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, at categories is something I do not like to do, because if anything happens to that player, you've got like a single point of failure with really no backup plan to get someone with that elite type of production at one category or two categories or whatever. It's just very hard if anything goes wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I can't really do it. In the surf draft, he went at 214. I guess that's a fine price. It's like 30 picks generally later than where he's going. But I'm comparing 15s to 12, so it's not really fair to do that. But generally around pick 200, I just think it's still a little bit too early for my personal taste. The next tier is kind of interesting. There are some names here that I really like: Michael Toglia, Yandy Diaz, Ryan Mountcastle, Christian Encarnacion Strand, and Michael Busch. There are some industry darlings here. Michael Toglia is a big one. Ryan Mountcastle has been talked about, I think, a lot with the wall coming in. But you've also posted some stuff about the pulled fly balls and how maybe Mountcastle won't be such a beneficiary there.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I put a thing out with, with left field in Baltimore coming in, did a little bloom board. I looked at switch hitters and righties on Baltimore, and I looked at their three things: their hard hit rate, their fly ball rate, and their pull rate. Right? Like, those three things need to happen for you to take advantage of a shorter left field wall, right? Doesn't matter if you hit a ground ball, doesn't matter how long the wall is. If you go oppo all the time, doesn't matter as much how far out left field is. And in Ryan Mountcastle's case, he is very much an opposite field hitter now. And I posted that on Twitter a couple of weeks back, and it was interesting. It kind of sparked some discussion. Somehow it sparked like constructive discussion on there. I don't know.
What?
Imagine that, Orrico. But it was interesting. There, Mountcastle has been quoted as saying he actually shifted his approach when Baltimore moved the wall back the first time, and the data kind of bores this out. He used to be much more of a pull hitter, and there was actually an intentional approach to start going the other way. So even though Mountcastle has not been a pull hitter the last couple of years, it's not to say he can't get back to doing that. That could just be an intentional approach thing that he was trying to do. So I don't know. At the end of the day, like, it's so hard to predict all that stuff. But like, at the end of the day, Ryan Mountcastle to me is just kind of like a boring somebody who's going to play at 230 and you can stick in your corner, and I'm fine with it.
If you had him as your starting first baseman, would you feel uneasy about that? If you punted the position and ended up with Mountcastle, how would you feel?
I would feel rather uneasy. I
Yeah,
would feel
that's
rather
fair.
uneasy, but I mean, especially in a 12-teamer,
Yeah.
I think in a 12-teamer you want. I just don't think the ceiling is all that high for Ryan Mountcastle. Like I'd rather take a shot on someone who I think has a little bit higher ceiling, and then if it doesn't work out, I can move on and use that kind of better replacement level type player in the pool and try and find that ceiling guy.
That's totally fair. Michael Toglia is somebody that's been talked about a lot as a big breakout candidate. The barrel rates are ridiculous. Like I think it was, if you just ignore plate appearances, he was like fourth or fifth in baseball last year, and he was just behind like it was Otani and Judge or something. Like it was just ridiculous
Yeah.
barrel rates. But he also is, I don't know, he's Colorado. The rest of the lineup isn't great, but there are reasons to be in and there are reasons to be out on Toglia. Where do you land on him?
I'm more on the out. I just think like, I mean, I look at a bad, there's like a bad batting average. And then to quote Moneyball, there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's Michael Toglia's batting average. Like it just sets you so far back in batting average if you're trying to, even if you have a cushion, like it hurts. So, and just someone who strikes out that often, it's just like, I don't know. The slumps could be, you could have full on weeks. And for head to head listeners, this is important, right? You could have full on weeks where Michael Toglia just does absolutely nothing, just very streaky type of profile. Yes, like I'll give you the power. It looks really good, but I mean, is it like it was last year? It's just how much of a track record do we have with Michael Toglia? Like he hasn't been a very elite power hitter in the minors through, coming up. Like his major league equivalents don't really pop off the page. So you're kind of just banking on like one year of really good power from Toglia to buoy everything, and I'm not there with him.
He's also hit 2 homers in the first 3 spring games, so that price
Oh
could
yeah, there we go.
the price is
Yeah,
probably going to be heading north,
through the
as
roof.
that usually does. But I think I agree. Like if he is somebody that I'm taking post pick 200 as a corner option, then I'm okay with it. But based on where he's going in drafts, somebody might take him, especially in a 15 teamer as like their starting first baseman. I
Yep.
think there's a lot of risk there. There's nobody on the Rockies projected to even be an average hitter. There's nobody with a projected 100 WRC plus. That's terrible. That's awful. So on top of his own concerns, the lineup around him is not great. So from a number of standpoints, I think Toglia is like, I understand the interest. The guy that around pick 200 that can hit you potentially 35 home runs if he's able to carry over the trends from last year. But there's a lot of safer things going, even right around the like Yandy Diaz is going 10 picks later. And I think that he is a much safer option. He's going to give you better batting average. He's in a better lineup with a better, not a better park, but a park upgrade this season. I think given those two going within 10 picks of each other, right neck and neck with ADP, I think it's easily Andy Diaz for me.
Same, ditto. I actually like Diaz at his ADP. Kind of similar to what we were talking about with Ryan Mountcastle. Diaz does go opposite field quite a bit, and I think with that new park in Tampa that has the exact same dimensions as Yankee Stadium, you can get a little DJ LeMahieu type season where he just goes opposite field and kind of pops a few over the right field porch and maybe gets low 20s, mid 20s home runs. And you pair that with the usual very good batting average that Yandy Diaz typically will produce. And I like that a lot. And actually, like, honestly, the Rays, if you're taking like team context, I love like stacking Rays. If you're doing like best ball type drafts, I love stacking Rays this season. I think the Rays are going to put up some runs this year, more so than people think.
The lineup is very good. Like
Mm-hmm.
Diaz, Lau, Diaz, Brandon Lowe, Junior Caminero. I always mix up my Laus and Lows, but Brandon and Josh, Junior Caminero, Danny Jansen,
They
Christopher
just have to stay
Morales.
healthy. Like they just have
Yeah,
to stay healthy. But yeah,
if they stay healthy, there's a lot of health risk. There's a lot of potential risk here for sure. Like Caminero needs to kind of break out the way we're hoping for, but I think he will. Josh Lowe, I think it's kind of a good bounce back potential. If Jansen just avoids getting hit by 20 pitches this year, he should be fine. Christopher Morel has shown a lot of really nice raw fantasy abilities in the past, and I don't know that he's going to be a star, but as like the number 6 or 7 hitter in the lineup, I think he'll take that. Jonathan Aranda has been somebody that's talked about a lot as like a breakout candidate. Like there's some really really nice things going on in this lineup, and I mean hell, Eloy Jimenez maybe he's able to stay healthy and do something. I'm not banking on it, but who knows?
yeah.
there are a lot of names there. I'm not at all banking on that. Don't be drafting Eloy Jimenez and then coming after me afterwards. I'm not recommending that, but there's always potential. You never really know when you're assembling a high upside group like that, and I think there's a lot of upside there. Christian Encarnacion Strand and Michael Busch, the last two guys in this tier, not really a ton of interest for me. Any interest for you between the two of them?
I don't know. I don't really know what to do with either one. I will contend that I will admit that I think there's some good ceiling with Encarnacion Strand in terms of like his prospect pedigree, but it's just like, what have we seen from him in the majors? Michael Busch, I mean, he's going to be the guy for the Cubs. So I think the playing time's going to be there. But I don't know. I'd like to take more of an established thing with like Yandy Diaz over those two.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like I don't know. Strand, I really think that he could do something if he stays healthy, if he's given everyday playing time. But
do you think like with CES, like, do you think like playing time for me is a little bit of a concern? There's a lot of bodies, a lot of mouths to feed in Cincinnati.
There's been for the last couple of years now, and I think like Fangraphs projects him starting on the bench in a short side platoon. So like that's brutal if you're taking him expecting a lot there.
Right.
But there are also a lot of guys that are not terribly sure things. Like, I mean, maybe Steer could go play in the outfield potentially or get some DH days over a guy like maybe Jake Fraley or Austin Hayes, and then maybe Strand has more of a regular role playing first. But there's a lot of mouths to feed, and I mean, Roster Resource does a great job, but you never know. You never really know. And if they are accurate in that projection, if he's a short side platoon, then he's undraftable. He's pretty much undraftable.
For sure. Yes, for sure. And yeah, maybe Spencer Steer, like you said, goes to the outfield, like boots Austin Hayes or something. Yeah. And then there's first base job for CES. But yeah, it's just, if you're taking somebody, this is still early enough in the draft, I think, where these picks still count. They're not just throwaway picks.
Yeah.
I like to have a little bit more playing time certainty and like some track record in the majors. It's that combination of both where it's like, even if CES plays every day, we don't really know how he's going to do. So
yeah, we don't have really a baseline. I mean, the potential for sure, but yeah, this is still a point in the draft, top 250 or so picks where you're, especially in deeper leagues, so it's like a 15-team league especially, these are still essentially cornerstones of your team. Maybe that's a wrong word to use, but these guys are still very important. And I think Strand is just a little bit too much of a risk. Unless he starts hitting the cover off the ball in spring and they say he's getting the first base job, that would change the tune a little bit. But he's a little bit tricky to click draft on right now. The next tier, a couple of interesting guys, a couple of fades as well. Nathaniel Lau, who is now in Washington, Tyler Soderstrom, Rhys Hoskins, Jake Cronenworth, and Andrew Vaughn. Tyler Soderstrom has been somebody that I've been pretty interested in with a bit of a nice, decent ballpark upgrade from the Coliseum going to Sacramento. The power numbers are really good. I like the lineup as well in Oakland. There we go. I know I was going to do it.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. But Tyler Soderstrom has been a pretty nice corner infield target for me. What do you think of him this year?
Yeah, in the spirit of comping similar players, like I don't know if there's much of a difference between Soderstrom and Michael Toglia, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I would take Soderstrom. Given the price at 280, I think there's a ceiling there. I think there's massive power. We don't fully know how that Sacramento stadium is going to play. We're all just kind of guessing at this point, but there is a chance like this is a relative launching pad compared to what we saw in Oakland. I think Tyler Soderstrom would be one of the main beneficiaries of that. Gonna hurt you in batting average, right? Just like I was saying, I can't drag Toglia through the mud and give Soderstrom a pass for that. But I just think you can get Soderstrom much later, and I would do that over Toglia.
Yeah, I wonder if, like, as a community, we might have slightly overrated some of the ballpark changes. Like, it's not one of the more – it's a PCL park, but it's not one of the more hitter-friendly PCL parks. But at the same time,
Yep.
You're coming from the Coliseum, which is one of the absolute worst parks to hit in. So it doesn't really matter where they were going. It was going to be an upgrade. And I also think the lineup is a lot better than people will probably want to give it credit for. They're not an amazing team, but at the top there, especially if Lawrence Butler is able to continue some of the trends. I like Blade. Shea Langoliers is a solid bat. They're not terrible. They're definitely a lot better than they were a year or two ago.
Absolutely. And we're honestly a pretty good lineup in the second half last year with Rooker. Like, I mean, it's
Rooker. I forgot about Rooker.
It's a The bottom half is little hard on the eyes, but
Yeah.
yeah, this is not your Oakland A's of 2-3 years ago.
Yeah,
Sacramento.
about to say it's not your father's Oakland A's, but it truly is not your father's Oakland A's from the
Yeah,
1970s.
I mean, our father's Oakland A's were like, I guess at this point, that's like the '90s A's. That they were like good Oakland A's. So
Yeah, I mean the A's were. I think didn't they three-peat in like I want to say the
the
'70s.
'70s, yeah, '70s they three-peated.
Good team. Um, I wanted to mention Rhys Hoskins just because I feel like I haven't really heard a ton said about Rhys Hoskins, and the numbers were
Yeah,
still very solid last year. I mean, he hit 26 homers. The batting average was what people will probably look at as the big stinker there at 214. But it was kind of an anomaly based on where he's been his whole career. Not that he's been a big asset, but he's a 238 career hitter. I don't think it's crazy. I think he can get back to that. He's still just 31, going to be 32 years old. Barrel rates were still 12%, hard hit 42. I think that he's a bit more of an afterthought than he should be, if that makes sense. Not that he's a huge target, but I feel like this is a really good price on Rhys Hoskins around pick 300.
it's a really good point. I would think I'm guilty of just kind of glossing over Rhys Hoskins. You're taking a little bit of a leap of faith that you are getting the Rhys Hoskins from 2021 and 2022, which to your point, Joe, was like a 30 home run bat with almost 250 batting average. Like if that Rhys Hoskins comes back, that is an absolute bargain at this price. Now, what are you have to ask yourself, what are the chances of that Rhys Hoskins coming back? It's an age 32 season, so young enough to be able to kind of recapture that magic. Missed all of 2023, and then like you said last year, Joe, the batting average was tough for Rhys Hoskins, but the power was still there. It was a pretty low BABIP, so I could see if you're playing that kind of rebound card, if we get that late Philly version of Rhys, you're in for a pretty good, like almost a Christian Walker light, honestly, going very much later. So again, taking a little bit of a leap of faith that Rhys Hoskins is going to revert back to the good version of Reese's Pieces that we saw a couple years ago. But I know I write for a site, Baseball HQ, that has coined the term, once you display a skill, you own it. And I think Rhys Hoskins still has those skills, and he's not old enough yet at 32 to where they could rapidly decline.
It's the age when you got to start worrying a little bit about those batted ball numbers and stuff, but it was still very good
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
Like if he drops off a cliff this year and has a 6% barrel rate, then we're probably toast. But I think that there's still some hope, at least at pick 300. Like I think that's a really reasonable price for a corner infielder. Not that he's a starting first baseman for fantasy teams, but I think as a corner option or even his bench depth in a shallower league, I think that he's a decent play. My camera's frozen again, so I'm gonna have to refresh it because I clearly have terrible internet. Canadian
you got
internet.
it caught you at a good time. You got this great smile
grin.
on or dopey grin. But yeah, man, you wiggle that Ethernet cord that you got, that new cord you got.
Stupid thing. I mean, this is what happens when I'm in charge of setting up technology. It's bound to mess up. So I'm going to refresh in a second. But I wanted to ask you about Andrew Vaughn because he's another guy who is essentially a huge afterthought, and maybe he should be with the White Sox, but he wasn't bad last year. 19 homers. He had 70 RBI on that dreadful team. He hit 245, which is whatever, but 9% barrel rate, 43 on the hard hit. The expected numbers were trailing behind what the 402 slugging, but a 440 expected slug. WOBA was a little bit lower than the expected WOBA. I don't think that he is amazing by any stretch of the imagination. But if he just hits the ATC projection, 22 homers, 77 ribbies, and a 252 batting average, I think you're taking that all day as the 25th first baseman off the board here. What do you think?
I think Andrew Vaughn is better in a deeper, like the deeper league you get, I think the more you like Andrew Vaughn because it is that kind of high floor, low ceiling. And I know this was, I believe, a top 5 overall pick in the draft whenever Andrew Vaughn was taken out of Cal. I think in a 12 team format, you want to go with someone with some more upside. And I would loop Rhys Hoskins into that, which sounds weird because he's older, but Rhys Hoskins has at least done it. I mean, Andrew Vaughn has had 3, almost 4 full seasons in the majors, has eclipsed 20 home runs just once. And that was in 2023 when he hit 21 home runs. And so, like, I don't know if there's another level for Andrew Vaughn. Like, I think you're just kind of like, this is someone you could stick at corner. He's going to play every day, but that works in deep leagues. I think in shallower leagues with a higher replacement level, in your 10 teamers or your 12s even. I want someone with, I think, a higher ceiling than I think we're going to get with Andrew Vaughn. And you alluded to the lineup. It's bad. I don't know how he got 70 RBI last year. Like, that was on that team, but I digress.
Impressive to have 70, but I think you're probably right. The upside is not really there. I just look at the projections and all the systems really like him. Really, really like him. And maybe I'm just reading too much into them, but like the Bat X, 115 WRC plus with 25 homers, 81 ribbies. Like, that's, if he lives up to that, I'd be very happy. But it also maybe is a little bit optimistic. But all the systems seem to like him still. So I don't know. He's a troubling one, but I think the default should probably be just avoid White Sox. If you're looking for some basic draft advice, just don't draft White Sox hitters. Probably going to work out for you pretty well.
Agreed.
The last real tier here before we're getting into guys that are just truly speculative guys, 26 through 30, Luke Raley, Jonathan Aranda, Heimer Candelario, Nolan Shanwell, and Ryan O'Hearn. I took Nolan Shanwell in Tout Wars yesterday. It's an OBP format. He walks a hell of a lot, a little bit of power speed. I think that's the format for him. If it's a batting average league, not as interested. But for Shanwell and for the rest of this tier, Ryan, any big targets or stayaways for you?
Mostly as a whole, it's stayaways. I've been ending up with some Luke Raley. I like Luke Raley as kind of that rare power speed type of guy at first base that you can get. Also qualifies at outfield, so that's nice. It is a platoon bat though. Luke Raley is not going to play against left-handed pitching, so you need to pick your spots. Like Luke Raley, I feel like Bub and I we'll be doing our Thursday night fab previews every week this season. I feel like Luke Raley is going to be a topic of discussion on that Thursday show every single week because he's just kind of that like streamer you want to take when the Mariners have a week with 5, 6, sometimes even 7 righties. Like, that's where Luke Raley shines. I don't know if it's someone who you want to draft and depend on as a cornerstone of your team. And that really for me is the case with the rest of this tier with Aranda, Candelario, Shanwell. There's just, honestly, man, there's not much here.
It's pretty dark. The thing that stands out with Raley that's interesting, 129 WRC plus in each of the last 2 seasons for 2 different teams. But the thing that really stands out that I didn't really realize until just now is that he was a much better hitter in Seattle. And that's kind of rare. He had a 166 WRC plus at home last year.
Wow.
And he hit 15 home runs, 264 batting average. If you're looking at what he did on the road, it was a 91 WRC plus. He struck out a lot more away from Seattle. That it just doesn't really make sense considering the way that things usually work for Mariners. Really weird, but he was solid. Like, he gave you 22 home runs over the course of the season. Like, that's pretty damn good with double-digit speed. As a platoon option, I think he's not bad. You know, he played 137 games last year. If he plays 120 or so, then he's probably a decent bet. But those splits for the home and away numbers are very weird, and I would imagine that's probably an anomaly that likely won't stick. You're not a Seattle native, but that's your closest park. So I imagine you probably watch more Mariners than we do. Is that a fair statement?
Well, if it wasn't for Rob Manfred and his blackout policy, then I would answer your question. And yes, I've got some workarounds here at the house. I can catch the Mariners feed. I think that home away thing it's probably just like kind of a small sample fluke. I do think the stickier split is lefty righty. Like, you just even just from a playing time standpoint, if you're in a weekly league and the Mariners like face 4 righties, like it's a tough start. In a daily league, I'm still in a daily ESPN points league that actually got me into fantasy baseball almost 20 years ago. I like Luke. I mean, you can, if you've got bench spots and you can kind of play that platoon game, I think Luke Raley is one of those guys where it could work.
Daily leagues are crazy. My home league is still a daily.
I'm only in one. I can't do more than one.
Daily lineups, daily transactions. It's nuts.
Yep.
It's nuts, but it's fun. It is fun. I kind of petitioned the group to say, like, let's switch it to Roto. I kind of tried to get a feeler out early in the off season, and I got a bunch of no's. So That one stays. Everything else is. That's my only head-to-head league, so I guess it's fine to just have the one to kind of mix it up a little bit. I know there's two of them. I play in two of them, but that's the main one. But it's nice to have a bit of a difference from all the roto. As much as I think roto is still the best. What I will do here just to end it off is I'll stretch it out to draft champions, and I'll go past 30 here and just look at some of these deep first basemen. Ryan, anybody in this group of 30 ADP and beyond, whether it's going to be Carlos Santana or whoever, anybody that you have any interest in taking a shot on here?
I would. It's brutal, and that is the takeaway. Like you do, and that's why I kind of said earlier. I think you want to get your first baseman by at least like pick 120 or right around that group was going, because for me it's a tough bunch. I think especially if you have a league with IL spots, I think Spencer Horwitz. I still believe in Spencer Horwitz. I know he's going to start the season injured, but if you can throw him in an IL slot in a deeper league, first base, second base eligible, I'm going to try and maybe twist that Toronto knife again there. Don't know. Like I would have liked him in Toronto still, but
No, me too.
I like Horowitz. I think if you're in a league that doesn't have IL, it's a tough stash. But if you can throw him on IL and get him, maybe miss the first month or whatever, and I think you're going to get some decent production in a lineup that isn't that great, but it's top heavy. You've got your O'Neal Cruz, you've got your Brian Reynolds. Like if Horowitz can hit near the top of that lineup, he's at least surrounded by other good hitters, and I think he's going to play every day on a Pittsburgh team that. Yeah, that could go on about Pittsburgh, but yeah, Spencer Horowitz I like.
Pittsburgh is a joke. Like I know Toronto's bad. I can speak to jokes having watched one up close and personal for the last couple of years. You have a healthy Paul Skeens.
Yes,
that means your window is open.
Yep.
Like you need to do more than Spencer Horowitz and Tommy Pham. I don't know.
Agreed.
Not to slander them. I think they're both actually pretty decent fantasy options this year. But for a real life team in a weaker division, a winnable division, I think they should have done a lot more. Davis and De Los Santos, I think it's kind of an interesting late spec at first base. I don't think Jonah Bride is going to necessarily keep him off of starting for too long. Maybe he will at first, but I think De Los Santos is somebody they should be trying to get into the lineup. I've taken him in a couple of DCs. Any interest in De Los Santos for you?
I don't know. I feel like it's kind of funny. He's going right next to Jonah Bride, first base, where I think Jonah Bride plays. And unlike where I say you can do like an IL stash for Horowitz, I don't think you can do that with De Los Santos. I think he starts in the minors, and it's a tough stash for me. So I'm not really on De Los Santos. And like in draft and hold, like you said, it can work because I think at some point he's up, and you could probably rely on him in the second half. But in a fab league where you need these guys playing in the first half, I'm kind of out on that. I'll throw Josh Bell out there. He's on an ADP of 329, someone who I think is going to play every day in Washington. And honestly, a Washington lineup, man, like they were sneaky fun to watch down the stretch last season before we lost CJ Abrams. But with Abrams back in the fold, I think Washington's lineup is young, is exciting, and is actually going to be pretty productive. And I think Josh Bell is going to play every day in the middle of that lineup, and I like that at a 330 ADP. So I'll throw his name out there.
Yeah, our friend PD Patrick Davitt got him at pick 426 in this surf draft. I love it.
Yeah, wow.
Like I said, 15s versus 12s. It does. I do know this is. I've switched to DC ADP, so this is just. It's a little bit different. Fab League versus draft and hold, but that's a hell of a price if you're getting him that late. And hell, even Carlos Santana. I mean, first baseman who's going to play pretty much every day, good RBI potential. He's still putting. I mean, he's old. He's old as all hell at this point for a baseball player, but I think that he's still a decent option. Like he's not terrible, as a backup first baseman, second first or corner infield potentially. I don't mind Carlos Santana, especially at pick 438. I think that if you're getting him that late, that's a pretty good price on him.
Yep.
Last thing I'll ask you, Ryan, just out of the whole first base pool, if you had to pick one target and one fade, who would those players be?
My one target let's start with my fade because I'm much more impassioned about this one. I'll do Tristan Casas as my fade, and I will put. God, I don't feel as good, but I'll do Jake Berger as the target. Jake Berger as the target, and it's funny because Berger and Casas are like, or at least have been right next to each other in ADP. So,
yeah, no, I like it. I like it. I don't know if there's one. There's a couple that I really like, but I think Christian Walker is probably my favorite. Still getting like 35 plus homer potential. Maybe 30 is more likely, but 30 to 35 homer potential in a good lineup with a good park. Biggest fade for me. You got to kind of talk me into Casas a little bit, but I think it's Paul Goldschmidt. I think at his age, Brendan Tuma posted something yesterday about, he's still trying to figure out that MVP season for Goldschmidt, and the homer to barrel that year was like, I don't know what it was, 70 something percent. Like it was some stupid number. And it just, I think that people will see that as like setting a new benchmark. Like, okay, we thought he was on the downturn, but he won an MVP. But I think that was kind of an anomaly, as great as he was that year. And at this point, you're paying for the name as opposed to paying for the production. Even though he might be okay, I don't think that he's a starting caliber first baseman, even in a 15-teamer, I think.
Yeah, and I didn't realize the price was that. 178 is not expensive, but I think for Goldschmidt it is. So I agree with you there. And I think just as to kind of wrap it up, like a general takeaway, like notice how neither of us were really all that impassioned about a target at this position. For me, that tells me that's why I'm also kind of shopping in that elite tier of first base, going back to kind of where this show started with Vlad, with Freeman, with Harper. I just think like the first base options for me later in the draft, I'm not super high on. So like if I'm going to pick and choose where I want to go early, I feel like first base is a good place to do that and just get it out of the way.
I couldn't agree more. You nailed down one of those targets, specifically inside of the top 10, if possible. I've tried builds where I'm taking, I think I have Mountcastle as a first baseman in one league early in draft season, and I don't like it. Like I don't like the way that worked out, and it's not something I would advise at all. Nail down one of those early targets, and then you don't have to worry about a dwindling position. It's funny. First base, second base, third base all feel kind of weak this season. And it hasn't really, second base is kind of weak, but first base feels like it's really kind of fallen off a cliff here over the last couple of years in particular. But Ryan, beautiful, my friend. Always great getting a chance to catch up with you. Very thorough as always. If you guys are not keeping up with Ryan's work, you absolutely should. I'm going to link the Patreon in the description of the episode. It is well worth your money, well worth your time to check out and support. A couple of great guys. We had Bubba on the show last week to talk catchers, naturally, and Ryan this week. And that's not by coincidence. I love talking to these guys. They're great people. They're great analysts, and you should support their work. Ryan at RyanBHQ on Twitter and at BaseballHQ. My friend, thank you for coming on. I want you to plug anything you guys got coming up, articles, podcasts, or anything else.
Appreciate the kind words, my friend. Just Twitter RyanBHQ and check out our podcast, Bubba in the Bloom. We record Tuesday, Thursday night. They come out Wednesdays and Fridays every week, all year round. So that's our thing.
The off season has been too busy for me to be in the live chats. I've been in a few of them, but you guys
go late. We go late too, though. We're both, Bubba and I are both West Coast dads, and so the only time that we can routinely record is after we put the kids to bed. So we're usually not hitting record until like 9 local, which is midnight Eastern. So I'll give you a pass, man. Don't worry about it.
No, I like the live chat. I like being in there and giving you guys grief over takes and lamenting the latest Blue Jays move. But we'll get into that soon. We'll get back into that soon. I need to be jumping back into the podcast listening, and we're jumping back into the podcast recording. So make sure you guys are subscribing. I think Eric Halterman is going to be our next guest talking second base. We're going to go through the rest of the positions, and should be a lot of fun. And then in season, hopefully I'm going to be doing these. It probably won't be every single day. But I'm going to try and do a lot more podcasts than I have been doing. So subscribe if you haven't already. Would really appreciate any reviews you guys can leave, particularly on the positive side. But whatever you like, we'll open to feedback here one way or another. But yeah, let me know what you think. We are going to be back later this week or early next week. But until then, everybody take care and have yourselves a great night.